All right, we are about to get started with our second keynote conversation for the 30 Virtual Symposium. Thank you so much for all of you who have been with us all day during our second day. As I mentioned before, this is a pre-recorded conversation, but I'm hoping that Michael will actually jump in the chat and answer some of your questions if he has the time, and we will get started here. So let me get this party started.
Welcome to the dawn. If you would like to continue this experience, press Love Sexy, the special guest experience.
I'm so thrilled that we have a very special guest with us today for one of our keynote speakers of the 30 Virtual Symposium, none other than Michael Van Huffel. We are so thrilled to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes. So we're trying to get people to know more about Prince in the 90s. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. And your art and design was all throughout the 90s. And today I would love to focus on, obviously, Gold Experience as well as Exodus. But before we begin, and especially for students out there, we would love to hear, how did you get the art design bug in the first place? Like, how old were you? Was there a particular incident, or can you talk to us about that?
An incident. I went to music school. I went to Berkeley in Boston, and I left Berkeley, and I lived in Cleveland briefly. I'm from Ohio. And when I lived in Cleveland, I started to learn what was called desktop publishing, which everybody does, sort of just does now. Like it's basically like word processing, but you could actually do things to prepare for large scale printing. You could lay out a book, lay out when it came to prints, tour books, things like that. I actually worked for a construction company. It was a job, and I did their literature and their manuals and things like that. So I learned those skills, and at the time it was a fairly revolutionary thing. And that sort of theme does continue in how my career went. Prior to that, that was not an accessible thing. And, suddenly you could do it in an office, or you could do it at home. And I learned those technical skills. And when I was in Cleveland, I was mainly trying to do music as well. I moved to Minneapolis. A roommate of mine from Berkeley had moved there. I went to Minneapolis. I fell in love with it immediately. I was a huge Prince fan, but that's not the primary reason that I moved there. But I really love the city, and Cleveland wasn't great for me at the time. So I moved to Minneapolis and did various things, but what really put me on track is I moved into an artist building. It's run by an organization called Art Space. They still are doing it. They're still they still do it. It's a good thing. It's a thing that's done. They renovate a warehouse in a bad neighborhood and give you inexpensive rent and things like that. And basically they're trying to gentrify, or at least bring it up. And the neighborhood was not so safe for a while. But we had huge working studios, and they were affordable, and it was a miracle, really, in a way. And just to mention, it was down in the lower town of St. Paul, Minnesota, and it was the only building except the Gillette plant on Prince Street in lower town St. Paul. So I moved to Prince Street immediately. I lived in Uptown for a little while, but then moved there. And the whole building was artists. It was very much a community kind of thing. And I was doing visual art and I was doing music, but as far as just being creatively expressing myself, it wasn't paying the bills. I would say I was doing like visual work. I didn't have much training in visual work, and I just like to do things. There really was no. To be honest, I spent more time doing music, but I did do art, and my art was like in local coffee shops and things like that. And I think it's worth mentioning. Some of my neighbors were extraordinary artists. A good friend of mine at the time is a woman named Elise Oldham, but her actress name is Kimberly Elise. She's been in a lot of movies.
Oh yes, a lot.
She's a good friend. This is a lot of young artist stories. I would sometimes pretend to be her agent and call places. And eventually I actually scored a short film she did. My neighbor, and she wasn't there that long, and I didn't really know her, but my neighbor was Satara Shetter. And if people know that name, she is the one that designed the symbol. The story as I understand it, and there's a lot of stories about this, but the one I understood was the sort of like man-woman symbol combined. The issue with that is it couldn't be copyrighted because it was an existing thing. So Satara, and I'm not sure how went through Paisley Park, or I don't know how she got in there or what, but she had done it a few years before. But that was my neighbor right next door. And subsequent to that, I mean, I had at least 3 other neighbors that at least worked production on the things on Prince's work. And another neighbor, Kim Lawler, actually painted the clouds at Paisley Park, among other things, and went on tour with them. So, being in the artist community in Minneapolis in that building, there was just a tremendous concentration of talented people I could be around, and it was wonderful. So that's kind of the setup. I think for that, I had technicals. Yes.
I'm curious. So does Art Space still exist in Minneapolis? Because I know it still exists.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. They actually have a building here in Santa Cruz. I mean, unless it got sold to like a developer or something, that was always kind of a battle we were fighting. We had to kind of hold ownership because at the time our rent was going towards purchase of the apartment. It's really just a tremendous gift to have that. So yeah. I mean, I had this huge amount of space. You could make a mess. You could paint. You could, to a degree, make noise with music. Surrounded by interesting, weird, talented people, many of whom I'm still friends with. So that kind of places me.
I mean, Michael, that's truly incredible, especially in this day and age, because I feel like we're missing community. And, there's, obviously with COVID and the rise of social media, there's like a loneliness epidemic. And I really think that, communities like the ones that you described of artists are so critical for today. So I know that, arts funding has been sort of dwindling in recent years.
To the least.
Yeah. And, there's collapsing of industries based off of, the transformation of digital technologies. There's a lot going on. So hearing about that just really puts a smile in my heart. And I hope that we can retain that in some way. Because I think that's really critical for artists to be able to be in community with one another and, be able to work on things together and actually look over each other's shoulders and things of that nature. And I think because we're kind of, on the laptops and all of that, we don't get that much cross-pollination anymore, which I think
I couldn't agree more. And there was the support and just the energy you get from other creative people. And then there's also, I never gave this a lot of thought, but it's when you were talking, it occurred to me. You also learn how to work with other artists who have very different personalities or very different styles, or, you know, are, and they could very well say the same of me, are, you know, prickly or weird or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
You learn to get along and work together creatively. And that's, I'd actually, when you mentioned the community and the fact we're parasocial, and that kind of disconnects us from, I mean, people are famously very mean on the internet in a way they would not be in real life. And you learn to kind of work with people. So yes, and it is, people don't value, I mean, it's happened when I went to Berkeley. People don't value the arts that much, but the truth is, it's a massive business. You know, if you, even if you want to narrow it down, take out culture, take out all the other benefits of it, it's foolish to try to get rid of creativity, because it's what's behind so much just in our economy.
Yeah.
Like, again, if you, even if you want to just reduce it to that, which I don't like, but even then, it's that thing. And I agree with you. And art space is very much still active.
Yeah. So this is a really great segue into the collaboration that you had with Steve Park and Debbie McGuan. Can you tell us, how did you meet Steve Park?
Okay, so my ex-wife Lisa, we moved to Minneapolis together. We just, incidentally, because it's worth mentioning, we met at 16, sleeping out in line for Purple Rain tickets.
Nice.
And what is funny about that is, you know, 20 odd years later, there was a show and I was sitting with the Revolution. You tend to, over time, you start to get to know the other people, and they've all been, could not have been kinder, nicer, more generous, more thoughtful to me. And I'm so grateful for that. I mean, they were my heroes. But I was like, I saw you guys in Cleveland, you know, way back. And they remembered the show because there was a huge snowstorm. It was right around Christmas. And it just, you know, it's, the other people I know had this experience too. If you told me when I was 16 where I'd end up, I may have just fallen over. And I don't even know how to say how I could possibly react. So anyway, my ex-wife was doing production. She was doing a lot of film and TV production. And if you were doing that in Minneapolis, you sort of inevitably ended up working at Paisley Park or through Paisley Park. So she was doing that. And I actually don't quite remember how it happened. Before I actually started, I had 2 meetings out there. Somebody saw artwork of mine. The coffee shop on the first floor of it was called Copernicus at the time. The coffee shop on the first floor of my building, like, artists and sometimes kind of famous people would pop in there for various reasons. And I kind of just got a call. I didn't pursue Paisley Park. I didn't know I would even have a place there. It was just kind of amazing to me. It was around, you know, and just little run-ins. I knew the Steels from another thing I did. Again, could not have been nicer to me. And I was backstage at Glam Slam probably a couple years before I worked at Paisley with Fred. And we were standing backstage, and just like all the stories, it's like it was like doors appeared, smoke didn't blow in, but it may as well have. And Prince was standing right there, and my heart dropped into my stomach. And he was talking to Fred, and you know, Prince side-eyed me, and Fred said, "This is my, you know, Michael." And then Prince said, "You know, how you doing?" or whatever he said. I was sort of like definitely starstruck. You know, I don't think I said anything. I stayed upright. So you know, it was funny running into people, and again, everybody was nice and generous, but you know, it was just a place I liked to be. But I did, again, my understanding was that somebody saw my artwork in a coffee shop or a small gallery, because I was doing artwork, but and it was just, you know, taking it places and see if they'd show it. And I just got a call, and I had a couple meetings out there, and they were for things that I later found out what happened. There was the magazine. Was it 3,000? What was the magazine? I can see the cover.
10,000.
10,000. Well, yes, more than my number.
It's okay.
They wanted me to do the 10,000 magazine, and it just to lay out artists and things like that, and do creative things on pages. And I looked at it, and I was kind of like, I'll have to do this whole magazine myself in a crazy short time period. And I was good at that job at the time, the desktop publishing, laying out things. I used a program called PageMaker at the time. And I actually ended up turning that job down, which kind of broke my heart, but I just thought, like, I won't. And I rarely turned work down, but it just seemed like this is not feasible to do, really, no matter how much I put into it. And then at some other point, I know I spent a few days with Chuck, Jeff, and then a woman named Amanda was in and out. And some of the things, some of the material you sent me, I remember, because those first meetings, especially at Paisley Park, really just burned themselves into my mind, because it was, I kind of couldn't believe I was there. And I, otherwise, I'm not sure quite how I did spend time with Chuck and Jeff. And it wasn't a lot. Maybe I shadowed them for a couple of days.
And actually, for our listeners, tell us who Chuck and Jeff were.
Chuck Zwicky and Jeff Munson, two talented, smart, sweet guys that they were the design department prior to, I mean, there was no like structure. Steve did things for Prince from, you know, I don't think it was Graffiti Bridge the first thing Steve did.
I'm not sure the first, but obviously he worked on that. And we've actually talked to Chuck Zwicky a couple of times, but in his capacity as a sound engineer. And
I'll be damned. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that was kind of the thing at Paisley. Like,
you wore multiple hats.
Well, you wore the hat. There's the story of the baker that became a accountant, and I don't think any other story tells it better than that. Yes, I used to tell people, like, if he hears you playing a tambourine, he might walk in and go, okay, learn this, and you're coming on the road tomorrow, or your job's over. There was a slight terror I had all the time, and it did happen where I might. Steve, sometimes I was like, don't give him any more ideas, because we were run so thin sometimes as it was, and Steve would suddenly go, we should do 4 comic books. Anyway, let me try to get back on track. So I had a couple meetings. I was around Chuck and Jeff, and then X number of time passed, and he was doing The Most Beautiful Girl in the World production, and my ex-wife was working. They had a huge party. They were filming. She was Prince's stand-in for he and Anton Fuqua when they did the video. The anecdote I remember about that is they made fun of her shoes the whole time. And they were my shoes that she decided to wear because they were comfortable that day. But she was up on the pedestal, and they did shot blocking. And she came home one day and she said, there's this guy Steve there. And she's like, you really got to meet him. Like, you guys have so much in common. And he was asking questions. I told him about you. And then I subsequently met Steve. And what I sort of learned is that Steve at the time artistically could sort of realize, what Prince wanted and what Prince, and Steve has a tremendous, what would I say, like a broad spectrum of capabilities. But he had no idea how to get things ready for print and to the printer. And at the time, Prince wanted everything in-house, but I believe it was even part of his Warner's contract that had to be done in-house. And I know at some point prior to me, they were spending fortunes just having things sent out to be test printed. Like they didn't have an inkjet printer. So the cost was astronomical, and nobody had. Chuck and Jeff may have, and I just don't know, but nobody seemed, at least when I talked to Steve, there wasn't anybody to get it from, the artwork and the things that he be put together into to conform to the packaging and the packaging in different territories and how packaging differed in Europe. And, there was so many little technical things. So I sort of had a slight interview with Steve after hanging out with him one night. And he said, well, you can do this and this and this. And he said, well, do you know, we use, I believe they use Quark Express. And I'm afraid I got these confused. Steve will remember. But he said, well, do you know how to use Quark Express? And I had never used it in my life. And I said, yes, I do.
That's I want to stop you right there. Actually, I want to stop you right there. When I tell my students, if they're interviewing, and especially when it comes to software, and if someone asks you if you know something and you don't, you say, yes, you know how to do it, because especially, with software, there's usually a pattern to use. Like if you can use one desktop publishing software, you can use the other. So I'm
exactly. I wasn't prepared for how different it was, but you're exactly right. And that was a lesson I learned from Berkeley. They always said, don't turn on a gig that you can do. We learned how to do horn arrangements, and they'd say, you may have never done one, but you certainly know how, and you know how people who are really good at it do it. Now, you might stumble, you might fall, but if you've got the skills, you should go to you can translate it into other things. So on the way home, I bought one of those, now it's very different, but then it's like you'd buy like a secondary manual for something. And I remember it was like War and Peace or the Bible. It was like this big. And I read it that weekend. And the first few months I was there, Steve or Prince or anybody that asked me to do something, I had the book the manual next to me. And eventually I confessed to Steve, he didn't notice. Thank goodness he didn't know what he was doing at the time, because he would have maybe identified that I was struggling. But we also just got along very well right from the start. And my first real job when I got hired was just to get the Gold Experience ready to go. There'd been many iterations of what ended up coming out. And I just did the finishing. I fixed some typesetting. It was not my design. I actually think the fundamental design was just how the photos were taken. That gold vivid thing. If that was done in Photoshop or something, that's news to me. I think that those were the photos that set the tone. So I ended up, sitting with Prince very quickly. A very surprising thing to me was how much time he spent with me, how much time he spent with Steve and I. That was always a surprise to me. I was surprised to be one-on-one with him, at all. And I was, and I had to, and I had heard everything. I'd heard all the things people said, don't look him in the eye, don't do the deal. And to be honest, it took me a little while, and you didn't ask me, but I'll mention it because it came up in my head. That was making me a nervous wreck to always be afraid to, and at a point with him, I found myself in the position many times of just needing to be straight with him, which I think he appreciated. He wasn't always happy at all, but I was either going to tell him or he was going to find out and be mad at me for not telling him. And there was there was lots of examples that he lived a very, he lived in a different way, and it took some time to learn how to communicate with them. And what I learned is just be myself, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't, it didn't. And I would just, fortunately, it worked very well, I think, and with Steve as well.
I just want to I want to pause here a little bit again for the students, like the being able to work directly with prints like that is extremely rare. And I know you probably at some point didn't think of Prince as a client, but normally you don't have that kind of relationship with your clients when you're doing things with them. And as I told you, I worked very briefly with David Bowie, and I did get to meet him in person. And he came in, he told us what he wanted, and then poof, he was gone. And so we didn't have that kind of rapport. I think I would have been like a nervous wreck as well if David Bowie was sitting next to me. You know.
Yeah, I'll mention, I have a couple anecdotes about that I can tell you that are amusing, and also, I mean, other people have said this. Really, it's sink or swim with him, and if you get through that, you can kind of get through almost. I mean, I went to Hollywood and eventually I worked in advertising. These are not famously easy or nice or straight dealing people. And that's not to say Prince was any of those things, but I had boot camp. I knew what I was doing. I could work very fast, very efficiently. And frankly, I learned to guard myself against bullshit. That doesn't mean I was ever rude to clients. With people used to ask me what I call Prince, I called him sir, which I would have if he hadn't changed his name, unless he said, call me Prince. That was as much as it was Prince, and it was amazing to me. It was magical, and I couldn't believe my good fortune, which it was. I had to focus on like the actual work, and the fact I was in an office, and that, there was invoices and there was a work order, there's things like that you gotta do that stuff. So the gold experience, and a lot of people had worked on it prior to me. I tried to make sure everybody's name that had contributed was on it. He had me draw little arrows pointing around the lyrics in a sort of mysterious way. I did some color correcting. Lot of kerning back then, if people know what that is. It's for like how close letters are to each other and the visual perception. And I was very good at that. And at the time, fonts were more wonky than they are now.
Yeah.
So there was that.
Yeah.
And that was really my first thing.
Awesome. I want to go back to something that you said about the gold experience and how you think that photograph was probably not manipulated, on the computer. And that's probably was the actual, in terms of the essence of it,
fundamentally, yes. That's what I think. I could be wrong. I don't know where they came from, to be honest.
So, we're going to look at some of the images that you worked on. And I think it's really important for people to understand that we're talking about the 90s, and digital technologies were extremely different than what they are today. And Photoshop was so different.
No layers.
No layers. And I'm going to tell you a really quick story. I kid you not. I can't remember what version it was. It was, I don't know when layers were introduced. It was 3 or 4, Photoshop 3 or 4. I maxed out the layers. And when I maxed out the layers, I corrupted the file. And
yeah. There was a lot of that then too.
Yes. Yes. So let me start sharing some of the work you collaborated on. And I want to start here. Because you've already mentioned, the most beautiful girl in the world.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about this poster here?
Yeah. This is one of the few. D'Angela asked me when you asked me. I don't know. Part of me feels like when the picture came up, I felt like I was more addressing a group rather than you. I already did tell you the story. I had all of my old work backed up on Jazz and zip drives. And I lost a tremendous amount of work at the time. There was 5 or 6 others like this, and then a whole lot of other stuff. Although I will say, because it was work for hire, it wouldn't, I know people are a little loose with this, and I certainly would take things, but generally, if you do work for hire, if you work for especially a creative like Prince, it's not okay to be taking that work home or keeping copies for yourself. And generally speaking, I mean, I've worked for quite a few clients where my name couldn't be on it, and they asked me not to show it in my portfolio. Now, I was never asked that there, but that was my approach with things like that. So I didn't have a large archive at home anyway. But this is, I wish I had the others because I remember them. But yes, even though The Most Beautiful Girl in the World had more or less, it did what he needed it to do, and it was a hit. They was going to go out the gold experience. They were kind of trying to bring that back up. And I just did this poster. I always liked it, but I also just happened to have it around. And I don't know what I'd say about this is that I always like those sort of swan type shapes left and right of the bottom of the symbol. Always like those, still like them. And without saying what, there's a designy version of a very immature sexual image in there that's a bit hidden. It wouldn't be obvious. I'm not going to say what it is, but there was a little bit of latitude to do stuff like that, and be a little bit silly and playful. And again, it's obscured to the point where I don't think it's obvious. But we could work. I just did it because it was fun and I liked it, and I thought it was fun to put kind of spiky elements into something that was The Most Beautiful Girl in the World.
Talk to us about, again, some people might think that this was easy to do back then, but this...
Well, compared to a lot of other things, this was relatively easy. But that said, there's a rose in the background, which, by the way, at the time, any stock art we used was either grabbed from the internet or we'd scan something on. And again, since people are young here, we had a great scanner. It probably was this deep and this big and weighed a lot.
Yeah.
And you would go to scan something, and this is relevant for, especially when I got around to needing a lot of Debbie's work. Scans then were like, you put it on a flatbed scanner, you close the door, and it was like, I mean, you could take a walk around the block, so these things, and especially if we were under the gun, I know what happened. Like, Prince would come in to be asked if something was done, which he always wanted yesterday anyway. And you'd be sometimes you'd be standing there looking at me when the computer was starting. Like, what are you doing wrong? And like, I don't know, man. Like, it does this thing at the beginning. So I mean, that was mostly done in Illustrator, and I may have used a program that Steve definitely used way more than myself. There was a program where you could layer things and composite them, like TIFFs or JPEGs, and you would actually have to render the image. Like, you have to render 3D now, and even that's getting faster and faster. But if I look at that, I don't remember 100%. There's a lot of Illustrator elements in it, but Adobe Illustrator, which is vector art, which is different than Photoshop, and I'm not 100% sure I combined them at the time. If I had to guess, it would be that I did it with that program that let you layer things and then render it out, rather than be able to see it live. Or I may have done part of it in one program, and a thing that I did at the time was I would do a certain amount of something, print it to an EPS file, then open it in Photoshop, and I combine the elements in Quark Express and export it as a printer file, like one you would send to the printer, and then I sort of did like my own compositing, workaround.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to the next image here, which is Purple Medley. It's one of my favorite covers. Can you talk to us like
that cover is Steve. I did some color touch up for him. I think I did a little bit of adjusting his letters. I did the back for that. And I remembered this when I thought about it the other day. I'm not sure if people will be able to see. I either had a different shot or that same shot, and we ended up not using it. The original back that I did for that, you could see more of the crowd. And he was getting out of the car like that, or the limo. I assume it's a limo. He was getting out, and there was a bunch of people behind him. Either in this shot, if you zoom back, or in another shot that was, of the same moment. And immediately at the time, it made me think of those like 50s, 40s, 50s, like pulp Hollywood magazines where they'd like catch somebody like, a mysterious, dangerous artist, celebrity, actor, whatever. And what I did is what they did it in those, and you can still see it. It's in there. I'm almost sure it is. But there's just a couple. I put black bars over everybody's eyes to like make them anonymous. And it gave it like not seedy, but it gave it a little bit of like just taking that style, because I saw that in those magazines. I remember, and I'm not old enough to have read those at the time. I just remember seeing them, and I thought that shot reminds me so much of like a pulp old film or gossip magazine where they're like, this person seen leaving here, and it's like insinuating something illicit's happening. That's how that struck me. And he actually really liked that idea. He never knew, but he came in, and I just had the black bars over the people's eyes in the background, because apparently at the time that's all I needed to do to make somebody anonymous. I
would have never noticed the crowd. I see them now, and I actually can see even with the lighting I have, the black bar over one of them. That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing that. So the cover is all Steve, and you're also saying, because my favorite part about this is actually the typography, like it's hand drawn.
Okay, that's Steve. That's Steve. I would say the lion's share of typography, but that's Steve, just hand drawn.
That's amazing.
It's possible. I did a lot of production work for Steve. So Steve would sometimes do one or two elements and say, "Could you make me an alphabet like this, or make me these other letters?" And I would piece them together from the different, and that'd be the serifs and things like that. Or he'd send me the letters individually and I'd lay them out. I'm not entirely sure if that was the case with this, but there was a lot of that. Like I really was fundamentally his support for a long time. And that gave me a real chance to learn and ease in and not immediately be in way over my head. Yes, it's very possible I sort of did the typography from individual letters he did, or erased them, or made it, he didn't have to do the P twice. Although, pardon me, with Steve, he could reproduce that, like those letters very well consistently. But if I look at it, I see the E's are very consistent in this and that. And it's possible he did whatever letters he needed to, and then I tried to fill in the rest, or vice versa.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to fast forward to one of the albums that we are celebrating this weekend. And it's one of my favorite colors because it's one of those covers where you can look at this for, in our case, 30 years and still see something new.
Yes.
Because there's so much going on. So can you talk to us about the Exodus cover and the collage? And there's
Yes, I absolutely will. I have a lot to say about this. But I want to mention the last one. That does not say "help me" when you turn it upside down. When it came out, many fans thought that Steve wrote that. It looks slightly like it says "help me" in Purple Medley. And if you look at Medley, YELP, it looks like help if you turn it upside down. Help, but it's not help me, it's help EM, even if you're giving it that.
Yeah.
But that was a funny thing. And the internet was barely active, but we kind of got wind of that real quick. People thought we were putting messages in. We did put messages in many things, mainly out of just getting like exhaustion and boredom, and just Steve and I had a lot of fun and laughed constantly. And there are little messages. They're not revelations. They're like our names or a funny phrase we thought of in the side of a tour book. I've never heard of anybody noticing any of them, but that one was not a secret message, and it doesn't say "help me." And I just remember at the time that being a funny thing.
I appreciate the clarification, because we always need clarification.
Nobody was crying for help. Not then, not there, at least.
Yeah. All right. So Exodus.
Okay, Exodus, and I know many iterations of this existed prior, and I've seen them. And if you have them and you want to ask me what I know, I'll tell you. But for me, and we were still in the back office, which was just down a hallway. They were really very tiny. I was across from a small office with Steve. It's where Chuck and Jeff were. And the place was pretty staffed up at the time. There was a lot of room for us at first. Just one day, this kind of fell on our heads to do something for Exodus. And we knew something was going on, and we knew what they were recording, but you never knew what was going to come out. What was, one day it was like, well, he's doing 5 versions of P Control. We need a cover for that, or Nona's thing, or, so it was very hard to track, what this was, how important it was going to be, etc. Everything had to be sort of approached like it was going to come out the moment we got the ink dried. I don't remember if we discussed with Prince what he wanted, or if Steve and I just sort of were inspired to do. It just seemed like the perfect thing to do, like a funkadelic type thing for. And that's kind of where we went. And yes, that's the whole thing. So honestly, not everything you see, but most of this was in place in like a 20-hour marathon of work.
Oh my goodness.
Really, I'm not being funny, not making this up. Because he really wanted to see something, and he'd been working on it. He had the band in. The music was from everything I'd heard, the little I'd heard at the time, it was super cool. And he had the band in all the time doing comedy bits for it. So I just remember the guys waiting sometimes for long periods of time to get their comedy script. So we had an idea that was this loose storytelling, psychedelic funk kind of thing. But I had heard very little. Maybe Hallucination Rain or The Exodus Has Begun is all I'd heard at that point. But yes,
it just occurred to me. So did Prince write all the scripts, or I don't know why I would have thought that it would have been more of an ad lib situation, but did he?
Well, I know he wrote scripts, or he at least wrote things down. Mm-hmm. I don't know the ins and outs. You'll have Morris on you can ask. Those guys, Morris, Sonny, Michael, Tommy was a little quieter, but yeah, those guys don't need a script.
Yeah.
They'll get you laughing your ass off in 2 seconds if they want to. So they, and they were good at it. But I just remember that started to feel like they were endlessly doing those, and that's just my impression. But I'm just trying to tell you, like, this is what I knew when it came to me. Perhaps Steve knew more that he didn't tell me, but just what I remember is very quickly. When we sort of got that idea, really, I don't know if people are familiar with Debbie McGuan. Debbie doesn't, Debbie, at least my impression is she's quite shy. She's very humble and modest, and couldn't be sweeter, and was just crazy talented and crazy prolific. And I presume she still is. Her fashion drawings in particular, I mean, that's what provided the basis for all of this. That really is what we used. So for the cover, for example, again, I was doing the endless scanner thing for the cover picture, because that's the back of it, that the Michael and Maite. For the cover, and for that matter, and also I know Prince said he wanted like a however many panel inset it was, or fold out, and the more fold outs, the more like, oh no, yeah, it's a five, what's that, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, that's a lot of material to come up with. That's a lot of space to fill, and there was just a giant stack of Debbie's stuff around. Perhaps Prince brought stacks of it down to us and said, make it sort of like this. And she just had these drawings. And what I started doing is taking pieces of the clothing, pieces, from her fashion drawings. And Steve was like, can you make me bricks to make a building? So I started giving him things to like build bricks. I ended up making the buildings. And I did most, if not all of that. But a good example, I mean, all of those buildings are built from pieces of her clothing designs, in many of the characters that are there. And I was just cranking those out to Steve, or he'd look at what I have and give me direction. I was very much working under Steve creatively, but he gave me a lot of freedom, and eventually, and Prince did as well, which I don't know why. I'm super grateful, and they really let me just try to do things, and so yeah, everything you see is built from Debbie's work. If there was a sleeve that had a bracelet on it or something, well, that might be the bricks in one of these buildings. That might be what the building's composed of.
That's incredible. And I'm just now noticing, because after so many years, that the image that the buildings are sitting on looks like Maite, because Maite has.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that. But if you like, I can. Do you want me to go back to like where it got to before?
Sure.
Okay. So we had so much space to fill. The cover was important. Steve making sure I was on the right path, because he was going to go back to Baltimore, because he would come back and forth and work nonstop, and then go home and recover and then come back. So again, we had a lot of space to fill. So for the inside, and I didn't know the reference at the time, and I don't even know. I had Parliament records, but I didn't have a large vinyl collection at the time. I probably had the Parliament CDs, but I've since found out, like, this is Debbie, but this is a continuation of an artist. I hope I'm not getting his name wrong. Overton Jones, and he's still around. He's still alive. He did the old Parliament stuff. The guy is very, very influential. And I absorbed something, and Steve must have as well, in what he did from God knows where. I was, I was young in the 70s, but there was like cartoons like the Harlem Globetrotters and Jackson 5, and they'd have these like funky segments in them. But then there's Parliament cartoons and stuff. And again, I couldn't have pinned it down at the time, dude, but I know that's what was in my head and Steve's head. And of course, Debbie's work leans that way, so it made it easy. So that makes up the cover, and then the bottom part, which is the inside fold out. That back piece with Morris, Sonny, Tommy, Michael, and Maite, those are, I don't know if they're exactly the same, but those are composites Steve did in that program where you make layers.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I just really can't begin to tell you the complexity of trying to put 10, 15 different images together. Plus, either Steve was drawing stuff or we were taking pieces of something else just to fill in the space. And also at the time, I see, just for example, that they're cut out of the pictures. If you wanted to cut Morris's head out of a picture, being clear, the photo of Morris, not Morris himself. If you wanted to take his head out, I mean, you had to very, very carefully draw a perfect line around it. I didn't even think things could be feathered then. That was meticulous work. So Steve was focused on trying to get that, and I think more or less to get approval from Prince to use that. And a very similar thing was used in the subsequent tour book, which I think you have a picture of, the free music one.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like the basis of this was down. I did the typesetting and the fonts. I gave Steve pieces to work with so he could do that cover. This was the most fun and most exciting thing I did when I was there. There was a lot of stuff I did, but this is still the thing I look back and I'm still the most happy with. And to get back to your question, that city was originally just floating in space. By the way, like, again, probably like I probably went to NASA's early site and found like a grainy picture of space. There wasn't assets or material, and we never bought any clip art or we never paid for stock footage. It's just like, do it. So it was in just kind of floating in space, like a city just floating in space. Sometime after Steve left and I was working on the typesetting and things like that, Prince came in and he was looking at it because he would have us, and this is fundamental to how we work, and it was important. He wanted things printed out, glued, folded, and put into a package so he could hold it and feel what it's going to be like in real life. And I mean, that was actually a big part of my job. And I'm not great at cutting a straight line or gluing or any of that kind of thing. But Steve also helped me with that, like learning how to score things so it would fold without breaking and stuff. So Prince had these, iterations of this as we were working on. He was quite happy, if I remember right. But one day he came down to the office, and in the meantime, I'd been working on, we'd get these Kodak photo CDs from photo shoots, and we get so many of them. I'd be like, when did they do another photo shoot? But there's so many, and people see them. A lot of the pictures are out. But I was retouching some pictures of Maite for some various things. And I had just gone through like a whole library of pictures of her. And again, imagine this where it's just floating in space. It's not over that patterned thing that you see there. And Prince came in and he said to me, does it, do you think it's, I'm sorry, I always want to slip into his voice. Do you think it should be like that? It was like that kind of thing. Isn't it just floating nowhere? So I said, so you want it on something? And he said, yeah. And he wanted an answer fast. He's like, well, what do you want? What can you put it on? And to be honest with you, like my biggest fear with him is like him asking me or me committing to drawing something that I couldn't do. Because especially in the time frame, like I'm I'm not the visual artist. Steve and Sam are. I could do things, but I needed time. So I said, well, you know, we've got these. I said, I've been working on these pictures in my day, and again, it wasn't like a sexually charged atmosphere or like everything was erotic. It was mostly just like being silly. And that's not to say that I was being silly with him when I said this, but it was just like, well, what do you have? And I said, well, what if, I said, we have these pictures of my kid. There's these pictures. And I said, what if we put the city on her butt? And I should have said hip. And I knew that the moment I said it. And I could almost feel my face getting red now because I just thought like, oh, that might not have been okay.
Yeah.
And he kind of stared at me for a minute and he's like, yeah, show it to me. And I put it together. And again, that was a compositing job. And to be honest with you, I think with that, I was just taking everything I had and pasting it into a new Photoshop document that had that background and her hips in it. And the problem with that, I never saw proof of Exodus that I remember. And I don't think Steve did either. But the shame of it is a bit blotchy. The skin's blotchy there. That was a dilemma with us sometimes, especially because I think Adele in Germany took care of all the printing and stuff. So we didn't have a chance to fully proof it. Yes.
I'm curious, like, what is the gold substance that the buildings are sitting on?
That's just some stuff I made, to be honest. I mean, maybe I scanned something. Maybe I took a picture of something at Debbie's, probably just like added noise and blended stuff. I really learned quickly there. The key to getting gold is making sure you use the right amount of green. If you don't want yellow and you don't want orange, you need to put a little green in. And it actually helped me years later in Hollywood because, you know, so many movie titles, they want a gold looking thing and things would look too yellow. And I'd tell the artists, I was creative director, I'd say, let's add some green to it. And I learned that like things, there's a lot of green in those, but there's a couple things you sent me. I remember exactly where I got it from. Like, I remember these bricks and these buildings were built from Debbie's things. And, you know, I'd try to make a new thing out of it. It really is just kind of like a gold glittery island. And
yeah,
it was,
I love
it. Pardon me?
I said, I love it. I really love, I mean, it's something for me, that gold base that is sitting on really brings the composited Maite hip together with the, you know.
No, it works. I probably had to shape it. You know, I don't remember, but it fits her hip a little too perfect to have been put in after. So I had to do quite a bit of production work on this to get it. We had the fundamentals, but to get it done. And the other thing I'll mention with this, again, think of the layers thing in Photoshop. And I don't know, there might be 100 of those figures of Debbie's walking down that space road.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could not figure out how the hell to do that. And there was a program there, I think it still exists. It's a program called Painter, which Steven started using, and then I used for years. And Painter would let you make what they called a nozzle. And you could use an image or a pattern, or it's like a brush in Photoshop now. But you could use anything as what you were drawing with. So what I did in Painter, and I had to like read the index of the manual to write a little bit of code to make it do this in the program. They'd add like a code thing. And I'm not a coder, but I learned how to do it. What I did is I took whatever that is, 100 scans of figures, and made it a painter nozzle. And we had drawing pads that were pressure sensitive. And what I did was I made it so as I drew, each stroke was a new figure. So but I honestly probably did it 40 times because you could only do it once. If you did it once and it didn't work, so I had to keep doing it over and over.
Wow.
So I had to start off pressing as gently as I could and try to get not too crowded people, but enough to give a perspective, and more crowded in the distance and more spaced out as you get closer, and just try to slowly increase the pressure of the brush. And each one of those is a separate, basically like dot from a brush stroke, but it's a whole figure. And I had to do that over and over and over and over and over till I got it right.
That's incredible. So one of the things I love about the typography that we're looking at right now is how some of the words are really large, and then there's different sizes of the words. Like, is this something that you did? Was this something that and if you did Prince just see this and say, well, make this word?
He didn't do that. He just liked it, but he would do things like that where he'd say, highlight this or make sure this sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, again, I think part of the reason I like this so much, it felt like it just flowed very, very well. You know, Prince and Steve set me on a path. I did support work for Steve. I did the inside myself. Steve was able to leave, and I was able to carry it over to finishing. And I think this, I don't know if I did it on gold or not, but this is also where I just mostly started using MVH instead of my name in the credits, because my name was just so unwieldy that, for real. It's not that I didn't want my name on things. It came up when you first posted about this on Instagram. Somebody asked me, I think they thought I was being like, that was my artistic identity, MVH. You know, like that's my cool my cool name. And it was efficiency. But when it came down to it, if he was standing over me and my name was running down 3 lines or something, I just was like, this I couldn't get it to fit. It always pushed something off, or was an awkward hanging off the edge. So yeah. Oh no, I actually do have my whole name on that one. Oh, I'll be damned. Well, there you go. Well, at some point I just started putting MVH, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure that one and that picture. That looks like Heavy Metal magazine if anybody's familiar.
Oh,
like,
I remember that.
That type of sexy space woman. And yes, at the time he was kind of particular about where she was placed in the picture. And I remember being very baffled at the feeding time thing. And again, I would just point out to people, I don't mean this to be like we walked 6 miles to school each day uphill in the snow, but even that feeding time, trying to make like a thought bubble or a speaking bubble in Illustrator that's like 3 layers, and then typesetting, and then trying to make it flow like that. Like that was a whole thing. And yeah, that was that. And I remember that was quite difficult to lay out and be able to still read on a CD, because he wanted there to be you could see the interludes and stuff like that. And I'm not even sure if they're in there. That was just a lot. Like 22 tracks is a lot to get on a CD that also has artwork and a caption on top, and the band's name and NPG and the legal stuff.
Yeah, I actually have the actual CD here. I never noticed about the actual. I see MPG operator intro. It seems, I don't think all of them are on here, obviously.
No. And I don't know how the cassette, I must have laid out the cassette in an album version if it came out.
Yeah.
Because I did all that stuff, but then we sent it to Adele and they handled the rest of it.
Before I forget, I forgot to ask you about this. Who decided to do the double or reflective Exodus?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I know I handled most of the typesetting at the time. May have been my idea, may have been Steve's, may have been Prince's. I really don't remember.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the cover. It's very distinctive, and I like the two different colors, you know, like the gold and the orange. So
No, I think that package just works like crazy all
yeah,
around. I really do.
it does. It has definitely stood the test of time. So I want to move forward and
Yeah.
talk a little bit about this Get Wild European single.
Yes, that's Steve's artwork. I did the layout and production. What I remember is that was a rush job to get the cassette singles and this out, and I did it very, very quickly. And I know at a point I had to put the lyrics in something, and Prince actually gave me the handwritten copy of the lyrics at the end of that, which was not a thing that happened.
Where did you get the eyes from?
That's. I think that's Steve's drawing of the eyes, but that could have kind of come from anywhere, because there's a lot of Prince artwork that sort of has those eyes, or you know, that was Steve. And to be honest with you, that may have even been fundamentally done. I feel like I remember watching him do it, or like working with him, because if something like this came up fast. For real, I really think he was like late for a plane when he had to suddenly put this together. I could be wrong about that. But I'm sure I did. I'm sure I made the eyes big. I laid out Get Wild different on the CD. The CD's more the way I would do things at the time than the cover, but I certainly use Steve's elements.
All right. So I want to move forward and talk about The Good Life, which kind of mirrors the design for the actual album. This is one of the singles off of Exodus. And you can see Debbie McGowan's work here, but then there's some also in the right-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner. It looks like a photographic image. I can't really tell. I actually.
Down. Do you mean where parental advisory is?
Yeah, where parental. Oh no, I see now that it's actually drawings, because I have the actual.
No, and that's a lot brighter. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Again, we had no control over the sort of printing and how things were done.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I did that. Again, I know I made the buildings out of Debbie's stuff. I think the building on the far left I built, and that was fast. That was done so fast, and I think I finished it, and he suddenly said, "I want you to put a car in here." And I could not draw the car that he wanted to save my life. I mean, there was times where I just thought I should just leave now and be quiet. But that car sort of turning like a cartoon car where it actually curves as it's making a turn. That's certainly what I was trying to do, but I just try to make it fun and goofy. And with things like this, if there's a style I had to it, it's based entirely on my limitations, which again, if you said you have students watching, limitations are not a bad thing. You don't have to be able to do everything. And sometimes you can do something pretty cool by just trying to do a thing that you're not particularly good at. It can end up looking kind of cool, or not always.
Not always, but actually sometimes you come up with like a new way of doing things because you don't know that actually can work out for sure. So again, with this one, I'm sort of a typography nerd. I really love the typography on this one. So
me too. I think that The Good Life. I think this worked out. Please continue. I agree.
Yeah, and so I mean, and I'm certain you did the typography for these.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm curious. This is me being a nerd, a type nerd. So if you look at the cover, The Good Life is condensed. But when you go over,
it's stretched. Yeah.
Keith, do you remember why you made
So I just think it looked cool. The reason it doesn't exactly match on the back was just for readability's sake, and the fact that I was way up at the action safe line, and printing, if there's an area that's sort of like up for grabs whether it'll get cut off or not. So anything important has to still be within a certain margin of error, let's say.
Yeah.
So I probably it was so full that I didn't think I should stretch it up to match the front.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A lot of it was just practicality and being very much in a rush. There's a lot of text on there. I mean, that's a lot to lay out. And then there was always legal stuff. And then, this would come with a CD, and there was legal for that. And then there was legal for different territories. So to be honest with you, like, yes, I put the building there and I put the car there with the lights and the building in front and the parental advisory. But then a lot of it was just like getting it production ready on time. So a contract wasn't broken with somebody. That's a lot of it.
And then, this is like a kind of a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In terms of the compact disc maxi single line on the cover, like, was that a requirement to actually have those words? And I guess if so, I love how it's integrated within the design here. Like,
it works there. I don't think that was necessary. The parental advisory was.
Okay.
And the legal on the back was. No, I just think I think perhaps the maxi singles cost a little more.
Yeah.
And at the time it was still like there was some singles were those little tiny discs. And there wasn't many of those, but
the three.
Yes. No, I think that was just to say that if somebody just looked at the front of it, that may lead them to look at the back, because he wasn't the only person doing it, but there's six versions of the song there.
They're like there's 3 different mixes. There's a non-album track.
Oh yeah, it's get wild. I'm not close enough.
Yeah.
Yes.
A non-album track, Freedom Music.
Right.
So, yeah, this was obviously very popular. The first time, if I remember correctly, that Prince started doing this, and I could be wrong, is with the New Power Generation maxi single. I remember that, and obviously Get Off has it. So there was a trend of maxi singles.
Yes.
For a while.
Well, he had maxi singles before. He had the 12 inches. That's what I remember. Is like 7 minutes of She's Always in My Hair was amazing.
Oh yes.
Ever.
Yes. The 12 inches to me, though, were usually just, one side, but the max.
No, of course, you're right.
When you're talking about like CDs, you're able to include more songs than on vinyl. But then the mixes came into play. And I won't go into that conversation because I like some mixes better than others, depending on who did them, versus when it was just a 12-inch, Prince would often do extended versions.
Yes.
I would much prefer extended versions over some of the mixes of some of the songs, depending on
I really can't overstate just how much material he was generating at the time. I mean, I think I heard 5 different versions of just P Control. I just couldn't stop. It just seemed like all 3 studios and as many engineers were exhausted, round the clock. He just needed a place to put all this stuff. That's how I think of that stuff now. Rather than which mixes I prefer, I think of just like he just wanted everything to come out.
Yeah.
And was doing so much. Like I don't know how you keep up with him, to be honest. I mean, I had trouble keeping up with just doing, the paperwork or the credits for those things, let alone the whole rest of it.
Yeah. So this is the inside of the Good Life maxi single.
That car.
Yeah, the car. I was about to say the return of the car.
Oh gosh, if I just had 10 more minutes to work on it. Really. Again, there was just times where I was like, I don't know, there's a limited amount of time. Yeah.
And now that you mentioned like the black bar over the faces, I'm thinking of that now when I look at the Good Life in that black box. So that's like a connection to for me now with the exit.
Okay, a visual. Really, I didn't have any like it took me a lot longer to develop more of like a design sense or things like that. We were just trying to have fun and make him happy
Yeah.
and keep up.
Yeah.
And not have a nervous breakdown, etc. It's like that.
So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is the Count the Days.
Yes.
German single. And this one's really interesting in terms of, with the last one, we had the car and now we got the clock. So yeah. Talk to us about this particular cover.
So, well, this was kind of a special event for me. I actually don't remember what season it was, but in my mind, anytime that Prince would, everybody, I mean, people know this, he'd call you at 2 a.m. and you pick up the phone because you think a friend was in jail or something. Because we didn't have a caller ID. I didn't have a caller ID at the time. So you felt kind of compelled to answer the phone and I'd pick up the phone and it'd be him. And he'd say, he called me one night and he said, could you come into the studio? And I was like, well, I'll be there in like 7 hours, like tomorrow. I'm in the middle of the night. And again, in my mind, it was always like 10 feet of snow outside when I got these calls. Of course it wasn't, but it may have been. And to be honest with you, I was really kind of resistant. Now, the funny thing was, if you were resistant with him, or at least in my case, you were resistant with him for that kind of thing, there'd be a long pause and he'd just be like, so are you coming? Yeah. Like, okay. Like, there's really no choice. But he actually, he was be a little seductive in his way. He said, I'm just finishing this mix for the song. He said, I want you to come in and hear it. I really want to see something visual in a package. I want to get this out as quickly as possible. Come in. I want to take you in the studio and play it for you. Now, I'd never had that experience. Other people did. I'd never had that experience. I never expected to. And the studio is very empty. There's somebody may have been around, but I went there. I went in and he took me in the studio and played me the song, which I hadn't heard. And I mean, I didn't hear the album. I mean, when I did the artwork, sometimes we did, but I hadn't heard it. And he played it for me. I was like overwhelmed. I was like, this is beautiful and amazing and powerful and emotional and angry and sad and furious angry and heartbroken and a story and the vocals, I mean, it's Sonny up front, but he's a whole choir behind it and the arrangement. I really was just genuinely very, very moved. And he played it once or twice and stopped. And I was like, not knowing what to say and just thinking like, what am I going to do for this? And I did think I changed the face, but I remember I had to do some work on that face. I changed it. I hated changing a face of Debbie's, but it didn't. The figure didn't look melancholy in her drawing originally. So I shifted the jaw. I did some things to sort of like do that. I remember I gave the arm some depth, but I'll get to that in a second. I'll just mention just an idiosyncrasy of Prince. I was so moved by everything I just told you. And he looked at me and he just kind of went on and on about how crazy it was going to make people or how wild it was that he swore so much in the song. He said, I don't think I've ever sworn so much in a song before. Like, this is the most. And he's like, people are going to flip out. And part of me was like, do you know what you did? Like, do you know, like, That's what you're thinking about? So that's not a judgment or a criticism. It was the last thing in the world I expected him to say. Because I was like choked up practically. He's like, did you hear me say motherfucker? And I'm like, yeah, all the times. So I'm sorry, I didn't ask you if I could swear.
It's okay.
Forgive me if you have to.
Yeah, I might bleep it out, but it should be fine. We'll see.
He was talking like that, but then we went to my office, and I very quickly had to put something together. I think he gave me some ideas. I had heard the song. I think he gave me a printout of the lyrics or something, and I just thought like it's somebody at the end of the road in some way. So I made like one of those roads in a movie, it just stops, and again, the building, Debbie's things didn't have wooden things over the windows. I wanted it to be a little bit grim. Or, if you look like that highway, it's like it's crumbled underneath. There's like, it's on dirt. It's like the end of the road. And I thought that kind of fit the song. Again, that was in one night. And then I went home, and I'm not a fan of the typography on this. I'm not crazy about the way it goes like this. And it, like the T and the H so far away from each other, but it was a rush job, and I know he wanted it to flow. It looks cut off in that, which is horrifying to me. But I went home, and I think honestly, if it wasn't the next day, very quickly it came up, and he came in and said he really liked it. But I made the mock-ups and everything you see. It was like 7, 8, 10, 15 mock-ups would be made for him to hold, look at, open, see how it feels, open it up, look at it. And he was meticulous with that. But he said he wanted a Dali type clock. And it says Geneva. Honestly, I probably just scanned a clock from a magazine and warped it in Painter and slapped it in. I hate to say that. Fast and try to get the letters taken off so I could have them falling off. What I wanted to do is to try to do things to that clock so it matched the rest of the artwork a little bit better, because it's a photo. It's a scanned photo, and like I said, I like what I did, that the time was falling off the clock. It's just never was quite integrated as well as I wanted it to be, but it had to go out the door. So that was a special night. It's the most liberties I took with any of Debbie's images, as far as like I changed the face considerably, and I think it says slave on it, which he asked me to do.
When it came going back to the clock, and he said that he wanted it to be Dali-like, is that all he said? Like, I'm sure it was.
Well, I knew the Dolly clock. I mean, he didn't have to tell me. I think he had a coffee table book with Dolly.
Yeah, but I'm sure he didn't say why he wanted a Dali clock? A Dali clock?
Probably no. I think no. I just did the best I could with that. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't even know if I definitely didn't have a reference image to make sure I got it right or anything. I just tried to do it from my memory of Dolly's melting clocks. And I know like the last thing I was going to be able to do in that time frame is like have one that's like 3-dimensionally melting, like in a 90-degree angle or something. So, all things considered, that worked out. Actually, I'm looking at it now. I'd make the clock bigger, and I'd make it bigger, and I'd have the letters sort of going more off the edge a little bit.
I think one of the things, and you've been saying this, that again, I think students should hear, is that you had to work really, really quickly. So you're talking about, hours, maybe a day, but not a lot of time.
really, sometimes it was just, again, you get real fast and you get real resourceful. Another thing, because you asked me, mentioned this at the beginning, space, hard drive space. We had to get things off the computer all the time. So if he came back to something he wanted from 3 weeks ago, we had these, like, they were magnetic tapes. They were like 128 megabytes, and they would take hours to de-archive, and we didn't even always know what was on them. Because we didn't have any, I mean, we had like a large, at the time they called it a SCSI drive. But even that, like, doing this volume of work and things big enough to print, even then we were doing 300 DPI, and just, yeah, I mean, we didn't have we didn't have assets. I'll tell you something, and this won't go for everything, but I didn't have logos for a lot of the companies that we were working with.
What?
No. And I found on the internet there was a Russian site, a pirate site, that just started putting up Illustrator versions of corporate logos. And in many, many of these, if you see a Warner Brothers or somebody, I've grabbed it. I grabbed it from some weird Russian site I found at the time that just had logos of major international companies. And that's where I got the logos from for a lot of stuff.
Wow, I didn't know about that.
No, we didn't. We didn't have stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have a lot of resources there.
Yeah. So we're going to move forward. And this is like a page out of the Ultimate Live Experience Tour book. And Free Music was one of...
I did it. Yeah. Please continue. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, it was just one of the songs that's on the Good Life single, but
yes.
It's also in the tour book. So talk to us about the Free Music logo.
That's 90% Steve. I did a lot of support work, and like inside the tour book, the pages that have like the old photo coding on the side, in the images, I made all those. Like I built a library of those for us to lay in, and those have some messages in it. Those keys come from a key that we got out of a gumball machine, I think in Byerly's, and scanned it. And Steve, I made it look actually gold rather than the weird sort of green, painted. That is literally from a gumball machine.
Wow.
All the keys were made from a key out of a gumball machine. I built elements for Steve. He put them together into those intricate designs. Those are from a gumball machine. One of them. And they're all built from that.
So I'm noticing a lot of things, and I've been looking at these images a lot. So with the live performances, Tommy Barbarella had like an American flag around his setup for his keyboards, and I'm noticing some stars underneath Free.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, it'd just be that Steve, or between Steve and I, we just took elements from whatever we had. If we had a picture of the band and Tommy's organ or whatever had the American flag hanging over it, we needed something to make things look interesting. So, we would knock out the type and put it in there. There was no, really, we were just trying to keep things consistent and try to get an idea of where he was going before he changed directions again, because that did happen as well. So that's what it is. I can't speak for Steve. Again, like on that, I just know that I did a lot of production work for him. I'd give things some depth. It's possible that I laid laid the image into the Free Music. Although, to be honest with you, that almost looks like a scan of like fabric or something, the way that E is bent.
Yeah, it does look like fabric or something.
We may have laid something on the scanner, a t-shirt, or I really don't even remember.
And there's the handcuffs at the bottom.
Yeah, I imagine Prince asked us to put that in. I don't remember why.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a lot more working on the inside of that book because Steve needed a lot of production help with it, and I was making lots and lots and lots of little elements for him to use to get things done, and then like laying stuff out and I'd send it back to him, or he'd come in and check, or he'd be working on trying to draw something or doing one of those very intricate collages, and I would be trying to get the photos laid out like they were photo proofs.
So I'm going to move to the next slide, and this is a logo for P Control, and it's very clever in that you have like the cat ears. So
I mentioned this to you. I thank you for saying that. I don't know if you would have said that if I hadn't already told you.
No, actually, no. I noticed it just because.
Yeah. I like this one. Yeah, I was able to put a little bit of time into the symbol and make it look a little interesting. Mm-hmm. He went a little logo crazy for a while, which is very much a 90s thing. Yeah, everybody was putting logos on. Pardon me, I hiccuped. Logos for everything for a while, and he asked me to do a sort of logo for this song. And I originally had a much more like Felix the Cat kind of silhouette. The corner of the P and the Y were quite a bit bigger. And he came in, and the great big pleased smile on my face. I said, "It's a kitty cat head." And he said, "Can you tone it down a little bit?" So I did. I
think it works really well.
I like that one. I just, for different things I put together, that's just solid. It just works. It's simple. It's solid. I had time to lay it out correctly.
Mm. So I'm going to move to the next one for the sake of time, and let's talk about the Versace experience.
Yeah, there was like a few of these. There was a few of these. There was like ones that they were like giving out at parties and things. Incidentally, the Versace experience, that was a logo that they faxed to us, and I scanned. That's how I got the Versace logo. And I was shocked that we couldn't get their logo. Of all things, a fashion house. That's all I had. I couldn't find it on the Russian site. So that's a fax. And again, that was a one-night job, and I just tried to make it cool. And really that's what I have to say about that. Except when they did the record store day thing, my name isn't on the credits, and that's not nice. But we did this, but then there's another one that's sort of floating around. He had me do, I think you might have one. He had, maybe it had the same mixes on it. Like, again, sometimes there was like 8 or 9 different configurations that were very similar to something. And he would have, incidentally, when I mentioned the equipment we had, the engineers had they had a CD burner. And, now these are like these little tiny things, a CD burner. These were like refrigerators, like mini refrigerators. And so, they'd have to crank out all these discs, and I'd have to, then I was trying to put these things together. So, this was just trying to get Versace to look as good as I could make it look, and to lay out an awful lot of text. Like I looking at those 15 songs with like the excerpts and the sort of explanations under it. That was just a tough thing to not make readable.
Yeah.
And like I said, I remember being fairly stressed that this fax was the only version that I got. I don't remember how I composited it, because I colored in the Versace. I blurred and doubled part of it to try to cover up the fact it was a fax. In other words, I try to make it look a bit aged rather than faxed. I tried to use the sort of low quality of it to not have it look like a fax. I had to clean a lot of it up, but there was still enough mess in there. I had to do something with it.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't think it was this. I think it was CDs. But there was one night he had me doing things, and it was one of the longest days I spent with Prince. And he did this a few times, but he sat with me all day. I mean, he was having tea brought to my office, and it was my old office, which was really a closet. And he'd sit. He did this with Steve too. He'd sit. He'd perch in this rickety stool, and I mean, like he'd sway back and forth, and he'd be like, right here. And yeah, and he'd say, just as a side note, with many things, he'd call me when I'd get in, or he'd call me to have me do something, and I'd say okay, and he'd say, well, when can you have that done? And I'd say I'd give him the best estimate that I had, and he'd say, would it help you if I came down? And every time I was like, no, not at all. And this happened a number of times. He'd go, I'll be right down. And he would. He liked to goof, I think, on everybody. He liked to goof on me. He liked that he made me nervous in a humorous way. Wasn't always humorous to me, but he sure as hell thought it was funny. He'd answer my phone. I didn't have a cell phone. He'd answer the office phone. Once in a blue moon, family or one of my idiot friends would call, and he'd pick up the phone and he'd grab it from me. I'm not going to try to fight over his phone. And he'd answer it like, Burger King, home of the Whopper. I can help. For real. And he was too close. And I'd be going, give me the phone, give me the phone, give me the phone, give me the phone. And he'd just be looking at me, smiling, like, thought it was funny. And he'd eventually give me the phone, and inevitably the person on the other end of the call would go, was that Prince? Was that Prince? And he could hear them. And I'm like, I gotta go. So that was how helpful it was to have him sitting in there. Or I was doing something one day, and he was, again, right here. And he just mumbled, I've been doing records for 30 years, and you're going to ruin it with this.
Oh.
I go, what? And he was joking. He didn't mean it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, come on, man. You're killing me. And he thought it was funny. And I'll tell one more like this, because I think this does say something about him. One day he was, and I mean, there was once or twice he was like, he had his acoustic guitar, was like humming behind me. Very hard to work when that's happened behind you, because it's that guy. But I finally said to him, I said I think it's cool having you around. Like, it's fun. I'm enjoying it. The guidance and the sights have been like, don't you have other stuff to do? And he just kind of looked at me and he said, I am doing it. And I thought, he's right. He is in his head. He's got people setting up the studios. He's just in here until he starts doing the next thing that he's ready to get done. So that's, it's a sidetrack from what you asked. But
no, I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing that. It just shows the humor that he had, but also it seems like you both had this fantastic camaraderie. And I have a sneaking suspicion that he also wanted to have his hands in it, whatever.
And it was different than other things, because with other things, he could do other things. A lot of the other things. He kind of kept a sort of like odd, sort of like, I don't know. I actually don't know quite the word for it. Again, like it wasn't always like this, but it was never like bad, just personally. And I could make him laugh, which I think turned out to be lucky. And and Steve was just endlessly enthusiastic and full of ideas. And for as much as he teased me, I know he he was very encouraging. He told me he believed in me many times. Like, you know, that all that was good. It was, you know, it was the rush and things like that. Or, you know, sometimes his temperament was difficult, and that's not a secret. And those could be bad days. But yeah, he was like that, and just working for me again. That day, he spent the whole day. That night, he was supposed to play a show in Miami at Glam Slam, and like the band was there, and he kept canceling flights like all day. And it was like 5 o'clock or something. And I was trying to get these things done. And I know it was dark by the time he left Minnesota to go do a show in Miami. But he wanted me to, it was some version of the Versace experience, but he wanted to give them, I think, to celebrities at the show. And around that same time, I did a bunch of like big pieces of artwork for a Versace show in Paris. And I never saw pictures of him or anything. I think some of that stuff got auctioned off. Like when they did when he sold a lot of equipment and stuff, I think they sold it. But I did a bunch of stuff for a Versace show too. And I'm sure I incorporated, well, I'm not sure actually, to be honest with you. I was going to say I'm sure I incorporated Debbie or Steve's work, but those I wouldn't think that I would. But he was like working with Versace.
It would be great to hear what was your experience like being at, I'm assuming Glam Slam Minneapolis.
Yes.
A little bit about what was the vibe like? What were the people like?
I really like the vibe. I like the people. I didn't dress well enough to be there. A lot of I wasn't particularly stylish at the time, and didn't have a lot of money at the time either. This is prior to working for him, so I only went there a few times. The Steels invited me to see a show there, and I took my friend from Berkeley, and we sat upstairs, and the Steels shouted me out at the beginning of the show. My friend thought I was a superstar. That was great. I was only there a couple times before I worked at Paisley, and the only other thing I think is anecdotally worth mentioning is one night I'm in there, and Jerome came up to me and just started talking to me, and he's like, "Have you seen this person, this person?" And I knew Jerome from movies. It wasn't as starstruck as seeing Prince, but it's sort of like, Disneyland characters comes up to you and starts talking and knows you. Like, I knew him that way, and he absolutely thought he knew me, and it happened twice. I don't know who he had me mistaken for. The funny thing is, years later, I got to know him, and he always, God bless him, he's super nice to me. Again, and everybody's been nice. And that dude remembered my name years later. I saw him in LA, and he was sweet as could be. And so that was my experience, just going in there as kind of just straight from Ohio in a way. Mm-hmm. And Jerome Benton comes up to me and starts kind of talking in riddles and thinks he knows who I am. And I think I was trying to tell him, like, I think you got the wrong person. I think he thought I was joking. So there was that. And then when I did work for Paisley Park at Paisley, I didn't go there that often, but the couple times there was events or things that he encourages to go to, I don't know how they knew, to be honest, because I knew the security guys, but I went, and it's like they immediately like pointed me over the entrance, the separate entrance, the special entrance. People are, who's that? And that's very funny to me, and that you do kind of feel important for a second. So yeah, that's my Glam Slam stories. Except sometimes Steve and I would get bored, and we would kind of torment the people at the store. We'd call them and say funny things. we prank called the Glam Slam, the store in Uptown. I did a decent amount of that.
All right. Well, we're going to move forward to hate experience mock-up. So talk to us about this, because obviously this isn't released, and we're looking at a Richard Avedon photo.
Yep.
And this is, and you see the eyes, which you will see on the single that was eventually released. So can you talk to us about this particular mock-up?
Yeah, I did both. This one I was so happy with because I actually had time to do it. He went a little logo crazy. He wanted a logo for the hate experience. Actually wanted two. He wanted logos for I Hate You. He wanted logos for P Control. He wanted logos everywhere. What I remember about this is I got those photos and he had me. I put that tattoo on his hip, and this happened with my tattoo. And it's just a part of retouching, but it's very odd to be zoomed that close in on somebody's, body with them sitting next to you and they're telling you to like retouch hair. I remember it was. I really felt awkward. I could have done it with him not there and done a perfectly good job, but he watched me and was saying, take that out, lose it. And because he wanted the tattoo there. So I had to clean it up. But those pants were more low there up close than I'd realized. So that, again, I'm not trying to be weird about it or anything. It's just, there's sort of peculiar moments that I don't see happening in any other time. You can see from what this is, we got a color proof of it, and it looked, again, I think it's a little too logo heavy, but the color was right. The sort of shading and depth that I tried to get into it at the time was right. And the day we were supposed to deliver it, he changed his mind. So I had to redo it in 2 hours.
What?
It's the one with the figures like this. And the thing about that is that was definitely winter and the place was fairly empty. And a young woman came in one day and she's like, I'm just here hanging out and I'm waiting around. And she said, do you mind if I just hang out in here? And she hung out one day, just sat behind me and did her thing. I mean, people didn't have cell phones, so we just chatted a bit. And I don't know, she may have been reading. I don't know what she was doing, but perfectly nice. But there just wasn't a lot to do. Donnie Austin was out there recording quite a bit, and he and I would go out to lunch, and he was a sweetheart. Sometimes people, none of these people are people that, I'm close friend. Donnie, I really like, and he's been a good guy. But this was just, sometimes people would wander in and out, and he's like, sure, sit down. And she'd ask me stuff and was just chatting with me. And I think it was like the end of the first day she was there. I turned around, I realized it was Chili from TLC. And I mean, they were huge. But I looked at her and I said, oh, you're Chili. And she hadn't introduced herself. I said, hi, I'm Michael when she came in. And I think she reasonably could have assumed I knew who she was. And I said, you know what? I said, you were just so out of context. Like, you're not who I expected to walk into my house. It's like I'm almost sure I said this. I said, it's like if you see your teacher in the grocery store when you're in school, when you're a kid, you don't even recognize him. So she couldn't have been nicer. But the next day, he changed his mind about that and had me redo it. And she was in the room. And really, honestly, 2.5 hours, maybe. And that had to go on a plane to make the deadline.
So who came up with the idea of the puppet and the strings to I Hate You? Because I've always loved that.
I think Prince did. His hands were like that. So it fit. I think he may have even had the picture taken with that in mind. The thing was, like I said, the other one's not perfect, but that really is like a couple hours. And I never proofed it. And when I got a print of it, it looked quite yellow. And I was just like, oh, like so close, so close to getting something out there that had been properly color proofed and things like that.
It seems like the logo that you use from I will call it the purple one, the original one.
Yeah.
You've retained that hate experience.
Yeah, that was like the logo for I Hate You.
Yeah.
You kind of wanted a logo for each song.
Right.
So, yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to go to Playtime really quickly here. And you will notice that it's the same photo from the hate experience mock-up, the Richard Avedon photo. And for those of you who don't know, Richard Avedon was the photographer who shot the iconic Rolling Stone cover with Prince and Vanity. Did Prince really like this picture, or was...
Yeah, and he was very much, I think it had more to do with Versace than Avedon. That's just my feeling. And by the way, Stone's one of my favorite songs of his ever. Yeah, honestly, you sent me, and I forgot to mention this to you. Steve told me the other day that I did the Nona Gay stuff.
Oh.
I didn't remember doing it. I thought he did it. I remember this to a point, but part of me feels like I might not have done this. Then I think I must have. That was just a precursor to the Versace experience and other things. This was just a version of something that we were doing many versions of.
Thank you so much, Michael, for your time today. And before we complete our conversation, I want to end with a final question. And one of the questions I always love to ask people who worked with Prince is, what were the lasting lessons that you got from working with him and that you can share with us?
I actually wrote some things down because I these lessons stayed with me throughout my career after. When I ended up doing video and film work after, and it applied time after time. The first thing I'd say, especially your students you have, and I've told people this many times, if there's a place you want to be, like if you do a thing and there's somebody you want to be associated with, there's a company you want to work for, there's an artist you want to work for, there's if you do comic books and you really love a certain publisher, if you've got the goods to a certain degree, if you can hang, go straight there and knock on the door. And the worst thing they can say is no. And that's not how I got into Paisley Park, but it is how I stayed there and continued to do work for them until probably 2001, on and off. Again, not every door is open, but in a lot of cases, people look at things and think, well, I can't get there. And sure, that's true sometimes. There's reasons people say that. It's not untrue. But somebody is probably doing the kind of things that you want to do. And to a certain point, there's no reason it can't be you. Again, I know not everything works out. Not everything worked out for me, but to a degree, go to where you want to. It's not about not compromising, but try to get your aim where you want it as early as you can, and go if there's somebody you admire and you can get your work in front of them or do something for them within reason. Don't work for free or be taken advantage of, but go to that. And Prince didn't teach me that, but I saw him do it. Another thing I saw from observing Prince, and I whether it's true ultimately or not, I'm not sure, but a thing I picked up is he did so much work, and no one thing, and there's exceptions to this, but to me, I always thought no one thing has to be that important for him. So because he did so much work, he could afford to experiment. He could afford to leave the bass out of a song. He could afford to do a completely different thing. He could afford to do something for somebody else because he was going to do the next thing. A lot of people get very scared, well, if this one thing I do doesn't work, then they get stuck. And the more that you do, the more you can experiment and the more you can fail sometimes or have things not quite work. But that fully opens the door to nothing carries so much weight or is so important. You can move on from there. And I don't know if I articulated that well, but I really ended up believing that do as much as you can, and you can try a lot more things. And again, I had plenty of flop sweats and bad moments and things that I go, oh, when I look back at now, that's part of it. And I would say that, there's a lot of failures or things that didn't work that were painful, but all of them led me to the better work that I did do. And the doing those two things has put me in rooms with the most extraordinary people. I can't believe my luck. Both as artists and colleagues and friends and peers, like, it's amazing, and I'm super lucky. So I don't know. I don't want to. I'm afraid I'm going to go on a tangent with that, but I've always had trouble putting that into encapsulate that correctly. But it's something I really did pick up and believe. And there's kind of like a practical thing I learned from him, which is, if we had problems with the computer or whatever, he'd say, call the guy, and what he meant was, like, call the guy that can fix the computer.
Yeah.
And he did that with stuff. He'd be in something 100%, but if something was starting to waste a minute of his time, now we don't always have this luxury, but to whatever degree you can, like, know how to do as much as you can, do as much as you can. But at a point, like, you'll lose your focus if you get sidetracked by other things. He had this laser focus and he was in stuff, but if something needed taken care of, like, if there's an obstacle between what you're doing and what you're trying to get to and where you're at, get the help, get the support, get somebody with you, get somebody to take care of it if you can do that. And it really was a matter of focus. And I always thought of it as the call the guy thing. And again, we don't always have the luxury of doing that, but this manifests in a lot of different ways. Like, I do the photography work, and we're doing large scale prints, and my art rep deals with them, and then there's a printer, and I don't know now how printing goes and what the limitations and, like, what's possible with printing now. And instead of me trying to figure it out or agonize over it, you just call the printer and say, hey, can I talk to you? And tell me, talk to somebody that knows better. Yeah. And use that expertise, and that supports the creativity you're doing. And really, just like, he worked so hard and had so much to offer and so much, like, he just couldn't stop. And it was extraordinary. And I just learned a lot about, like, just trying new things anytime I could. And for myself, and if I got bored with something, switch. Like, don't be afraid to change direction, or don't be afraid to do work that goes against your instincts. If you do things a certain way, sometimes, and it's really worked for me over time, I'll think, no, I'm gonna go against all my normal instincts and try to fight those and see what I come up with. And the limitations thing is another thing. I mean, it's great, the tools and capacities we have now, but sometimes it's pretty amazing what you can get if you put some limitations on yourself, or limitations on how many tools you use for something, or limitations on how much you will do digitally. You can still do digital work, but you can limit yourself and say, but I'm going to stay within this realm. And those are things I learned. And I didn't approach Paisley Park like this, but after working for him and seeing what he did, I'm not Prince. I'll never be Prince, but I was good enough to knock on doors when I was in LA, and knew that I was good enough to at least hang with hang with the job I was going for. And it works. And again, not working yourself into the ground, but working hard and enjoying yourself. It makes you good at stuff, and it gives you confidence, and I don't know. This is kind of boilerplate creative stuff, but it is a lot of the cliches are just true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and students really need to hear a lot of what you're saying, because sometimes it just comes down to like working hard, having fun, being experimental, and having some play in your life. So I
And finding yourself or your different man, like,
mm,
finding what resonates with you. That might not even be what you make a living doing, but I find like doing things that are meaningful to me, even if they don't have any commercial value, that energizes the commercial work that I do.
yes, yes. You actually just described me in my Prince work while we're here with the Prince Symposium, because
There
it
you go.
definitely fuels me. So, Michael, we could talk forever, because we didn't even touch probably half of what we originally were going to talk about.
I know, I know. Brevity is not my strong suit, and
Oh, no,
everybody
no.
will tell you.
No, no, but I just want everyone who's watching to know that you've done a lot of work for Prince, and we didn't even talk about your work post Prince, because obviously you've had a very illustrious career. But I am mindful of time, and time is really important to me, and I so value that you took the time out to talk to us today about your time with Prince during the era that we're focusing on for this symposium, which is the Gold Experience in Exodus. So thank you so much, Michael, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I learned a lot. You know, I, Prince was a huge mentor for me. He believed in me. I was very, very, very lucky. A lot of times people ask me or talk to me about working for him, and I, I got very, very fortunate, and in many ways. And what I did is I think I worked very hard, and it worked out. Like it wasn't all handed to me, but it was a lot of luck, a lot of good fortune, which a lot of life is. And Steve was a mentor. I really, people from 5 or 6 generations of the Prince family are like those are my people. There's like family. Many are my closest friends, and I really can't say how valuable. That's the big gift Prince gave me.
Mm.
That's the big gift Prince gave me. I can't believe the people I've been able to keep company with, and including you, for sure. It's absolutely true. I've been very, very, very lucky. And yeah, it's yeah, I would say that.
I,
That's what I'd say.
I love that, Michael, because it really comes back to how we started the conversation about Artscape and the community. It's all
Mhm.
about people and the community and the relationships that you form. So,
It's real.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these have been my most lasting relationships from my mid-20s. That's something else, because I've been other places, and I know people from other places, but no, these are the ones that stuck, and they're, it's like my family or my people, and I've everybody's always been good to me, and you know what's luckier than that?
Yeah, for sure. And just really quickly, I want to put up this banner before I forget, so that everyone can get in touch with Michael at Instagram account, instagram.com/Michael SVH. And I also have your link tree. So if you want to learn even more, you can find additional information about Michael on his link tree, which is /MVH photos. So thank you again, Michael, for your time.
D'Angelo, thank you so much, and thank everybody that took the time to maybe listen to this.
All right. So I again want to thank Michael Van Huffel for joining us. And is this the Debbie McGuan in the chat? If so, so much gratitude for all that you've done for Prince. So much. I would love to interview you as well. If you're open to it, that would be amazing. And let me move this down so I'm looking more at the camera. And I love this comment from Ronlin, we're the family that Prince built. We're all related by Prince, and that is so true. And yes, definitely follow Michael on Instagram. Thank you so much. And so much thanks to Michael again, and so much gratitude to Debbie. And let's see what we have left here. Yes, so good. Yes, definitely. We want to send nothing but love and gratitude to Michael. And thank you, Twyla, thank you so much. Thank you. So we're going to, yes, Debbie's here. That's so incredible. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we're going to reconvene over at Zoom Events for our very final session. And remember, like yesterday, this is going to be a session where you can turn on your camera and you can talk about what resonated with you today. I'm sure a lot of you will be talking about this wonderful keynote conversation from Michael Van Huffel. And yes, we would love to hear your journey and stories, Debbie. If you're open to it, I would absolutely love to do that. And let's see what Camila's saying. Oh, thank you so much, Camila. I really appreciate that. And I was really moved by things people said. And Debbie at the end was just, yes, it was absolute perfection. Thank you so much, EA. I really do appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Michael. That means so much to me. It really does. So we are going to, again, take like a 9-minute break, and then we'll reconvene over in Zoom at 8:45, and it'll be a wrap of 2 days of celebrating the Gold Experience and Exodus and the Versace Experience and the Beautiful Experience TV special. We could go on and on and on, being tri-coastal at Glam Slam. So much happened around 95, 94. And so, we've been crossing years this time because it was just so much work. So again, thanks to you again, Michael. Thank you, Debbie and Steve Park, for all of the amazing collaborations with all of the art and design that surrounded Prince during this era. Oh my God, D68A. That's incredible. Thank you so much for hanging with us for so long. And yes, for sure. Oh, thank you. I tried to, do some little sparkles. So let's take a really quick break, hydrate, and then we'll reconvene over at Zoom. And thank you again to Michael Van Huffel, Debbie McGuan, and Steve Park for all of the amazing contributions to Prince and the Prince community over the years.